There's a universal feeling of safety we all share. The simple act of locking the door, of turning out the lights, and settling into bed. It's a signal to the world that we are closed for the night, that we are at our most vulnerable, and most trusting. The walls of our home become a shield. But sometimes, the shield fails. Tonight's stories are about those moments when the sanctity of sleep was shattered by the presence of someone who was not invited. These are 4 true creepy stories of home intruders while sleeping. Our first story comes from a woman named Chloe. She lived in a small, ground-floor apartment with her dog, a lazy, friendly beagle named Baxter. The apartment was in a decent neighborhood, but being on the ground floor, she was always diligent about locking her windows and sliding glass door that led to a tiny patio. One particularly hot summer night, Chloe decided to leave her bedroom door open to let the crossbreeze from the living room window cool her down. Baxter, as usual, was snoring softly at the foot of her bed. She fell into a deep, comfortable sleep. It was a sound that woke her. Not a loud sound. A click. It was the distinct, metallic sound of the sliding glass door in her living room being closed. Her eyes snapped open in the darkness. Her heart immediately started hammering against her ribs. Baxter lifted his head, letting out a low, uncertain whine. She lay perfectly still, straining her ears. For a moment, there was nothing. Just the hum of the refrigerator. Then, a soft creak. A floorboard in the hallway, just outside her bedroom door. Someone was inside her apartment. Fear, cold and sharp, locked her in place. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe. She stared into the blackness of her open bedroom doorway. Baxter began to growl, a deep, rumbling sound she'd never heard from him before. And then, she saw it. A shape. A tall, dark silhouette slowly filling her doorway. It was a man, just standing there, watching her. He didn't move, didn't speak. He was just a shadowy outline against the slightly lighter darkness of the hall. Minutes felt like hours. She could feel his eyes on her, and she prayed he thought she was still asleep. Baxter's growls grew louder, more aggressive. The man in the doorway took one slow, deliberate step into the room. And that's when Baxter erupted. The beagle launched himself off the bed, barking and snarling like a rabid animal. The sudden noise and movement broke the intruder's nerve. Chloe heard his footsteps, quick and heavy, retreating back down the hall. The sliding door rattled open and then slammed shut. She scrambled out of bed, slammed her bedroom door shut, and called the police. When they arrived, they found the sliding door unlocked. There were muddy footprints on her patio. But the most chilling detail was what one officer pointed out near her bed. On the floor, right where the man had been standing, was a single, small, neatly folded pocket knife. He hadn't come to steal. He had been standing there, deciding what to do with the woman sleeping just a few feet away. And to this day, Chloe wonders what his decision would have been if her dog hadn't been there. Our second story involves a young couple, Mark and Sarah, who had just moved into their first house. It was an older, 2-story home with lots of character, and plenty of creaks and groans they hadn't gotten used to yet. Their first week there, they were both heavy sleepers, exhausted from the move. One night, Sarah was woken by a sound. It wasn't a crash or a bang. It was a voice. A faint, hushed whisper. It seemed to be coming from the far corner of the room, near the walk-in closet. She lay still, listening. The whisper came again, but she couldn't make out the words. It was just a sibilant hiss, like someone trying to get her attention without waking Mark. Thinking it was just the house settling, or a weird dream, she rolled over and closed her eyes. But the whispering persisted. It was soft, but constant. A stream of unintelligible words. Annoyed and now a little unnerved, she reached over and shook Mark. "Mark," she whispered. "Do you hear that?" Mark grumbled, half asleep. "Hear what?" "It's nothing, go back to sleep." But Sarah couldn't. The whispering was getting slightly louder, more insistent. It sounded close, like it was right next to her side of the bed. Her blood ran cold. She slowly, ever so slowly, turned her head to look over the edge of the mattress. There was nothing there. Just the darkness under the bed. The whispering stopped. A wave of relief washed over her. It was her imagination. She took a deep breath and was about to settle back onto her pillow when she heard it again. This time, it was crystal clear. It came from directly above her. From the closet. A childlike voice, clear as day, whispered, "She's looking at me." Sarah screamed. Mark jolted upright, fumbling for the lamp. Light flooded the room. The closet door, which they always kept closed, was open a crack. Nothing was there. They searched the whole house, finding every door and window locked tight. They wrote it off as a shared nightmare or stress. It wasn't until a month later, when Mark was installing a new shelf in that same closet, that he found it. Tucked away in a high, dark corner of the closet, behind a loose piece of drywall, was a small, old-fashioned baby monitor receiver. It was covered in dust, but the power light was faintly glowing. Someone had been listening. And someone, from another room, had been whispering back. This story comes from a man named David, who lived alone in a remote, rural house. His nearest neighbor was almost a mile away. He was a sound sleeper, and the usual sounds of the country at night, coyotes, wind in the trees, never bothered him. One autumn night, he was woken by a different kind of sound. A slow, dragging sound. Followed by a soft, scraping noise. Scratch, drag, scratch, drag. It was coming from downstairs. His first thought was a raccoon or a possum had somehow gotten into his kitchen. He grabbed the baseball bat he kept by his bed and crept to the top of the stairs. The sounds were clearer now. It was definitely in the kitchen. He flipped the light switch, flooding the downstairs hallway with light. The sounds stopped instantly. "Hello," he called out, his voice echoing in the silent house. No answer. He descended the stairs, bat held tight, his knuckles white. He checked the kitchen. Nothing. The back door was locked. All the windows were secure. He was completely alone. Shaking his head, he wrote it off as the house settling or an animal on the roof, turned off the light, and went back to bed. The moment his head hit the pillow, the sound started again. Scratch, drag, scratch, drag. This time, it was at the bottom of the stairs. Fear turned to anger. He stormed out of his room and flipped the hallway light on again. The sound stopped. The hallway was empty. But this time, as he looked down at the polished wooden floor at the foot of the stairs, he saw something that made his stomach drop. There were fresh, thin scratches in the wood, cutting through the dusty footprints he'd made himself just moments before. They looked like they were made by long, sharp fingernails. He slept with the lights on that night. The next morning, he called a friend to come stay with him. As he was telling his friend the story over coffee, his friend's face went pale. He pointed to the living room window, which had a clear view of the side of the house. "David," his friend said, his voice trembling. "You said you were alone last night, right?" David nodded. "Then whose footprints are those?" his friend asked. They went outside. Leading away from the kitchen window, through the morning dew on the grass, was a single set of bare footprints. They didn't lead to the house. They led away from it, disappearing into the woods. Someone, or something, had been inside with him all night, and had only left when his friend arrived. Our final story is from a college student named Amy. She was staying over at her boyfriend, Jake's, apartment for the weekend. It was a small, studio apartment, just one open-plan room with a kitchenette and a separate bathroom. That night, they fell asleep watching a movie on the couch, eventually just deciding to sleep there instead of moving to the bed. In the dead of night, Amy woke up. The TV was off, and the room was pitch black. The only sound was Jake's deep, rhythmic breathing beside her. She was about to close her eyes again when she heard it. Another set of breaths. It was lighter than Jake's. Faster. The shallow, quick breaths of someone who is awake and anxious. Her body went rigid. She listened intently. There was Jake's breathing. And there, unmistakably, was another person's. It sounded like it was coming from just a few feet away, near the apartment's front door. She didn't dare move. She slowly reached her hand out under the blanket and pinched Jake's arm, hard. He stirred, grunting. "Jake," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Don't move. There's someone in here." Jake froze. In the silence, the third set of breathing became even more pronounced. It was right there, in the darkness with them. They could both hear it now. Jake's hand tightened around hers. He slowly, carefully, began to slide his other hand toward the coffee table, where his phone was charging. The moment his fingers brushed the phone, the breathing stopped. A floorboard creaked by the door. Then, a soft, almost inaudible shuffling sound. They waited, paralyzed, for what felt like an eternity. The apartment was silent again. After 10 minutes of terrifying silence, Jake finally moved. He lunged for his phone, turning on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness. The apartment was empty. The door was still locked, the chain still on. They were alone. They spent the rest of the night with every light on, too scared to sleep. As the sun rose, casting light into the room, Amy noticed something she hadn't seen in the dark. On the small rug by the front door, partially hidden by a shoe, was a single, crumpled, used tissue. It wasn't Jake's, and it wasn't hers. It was damp, and stained with a reddish-brown substance that looked like dried blood. Whoever had been breathing in the dark with them hadn't just been watching. They had been standing by the door, sick and waiting, for a very, very long time. The lock on the door, the familiar sounds of our home, the comfort of our own bed, these are illusions of safety that can be shattered in an instant. A silhouette in a doorway, a whisper from the dark, a scrape on the floor, or the sound of a stranger breathing in the room you thought was yours alone. These stories remind us that sometimes, the most terrifying thing is not what's outside, but what has already found its way in. Which story scared you the most? Comment below and subscribe for more true horror stories.